Some relationships do not break your heart all at once. They slowly teach your heart to break itself, and maybe that is the hidden psychology of toxic relationships. They rarely begin with pain. They begin with comfort, attention, intimacy, and the dangerous illusion that you have finally found someone who understands you. At first, it feels magical. You feel seen, chosen, needed. The conversations last for hours. Their attention feels addictive. Their affection feels intense, almost cinematic. And without realizing it, you slowly begin building your emotional home inside another human being. But then something changes. Not suddenly, quietly. The warmth becomes inconsistency. The reassurance becomes confusion. The love becomes emotional survival. And the terrifying part is this: you often do not notice the damage while it is happening, because toxic relationships do not always look toxic from the inside. Sometimes they look like passion. Sometimes they look like loyalty. Sometimes they even look like love. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that is what happens to millions of people. They mistake attachment for destiny, control for protection, emotional chaos for deep connection. A toxic relationship does not just hurt you emotionally, it rewires the way you see yourself. You begin doubting your memory, your worth, your instincts. You apologize for things that were never your fault. You become smaller just to keep the peace. And one day you wake up exhausted, wondering how someone who once felt like home became the reason you no longer recognize yourself. But this video is not just about toxic people. It is about the hidden psychological mechanisms that trap good people inside unhealthy emotional prisons. Because the most dangerous relationships are not the ones that destroy you immediately. They are the ones that slowly convince you that destruction is normal. And once you understand the psychology behind it, you will never see relationships the same way again. Part 1. Why toxic relationships feel addictive. If a relationship hurts you so much, why is it so hard to leave? This is the question that haunts almost everyone who has experienced emotional toxicity. From the outside, people think it should be easy. If they treat you badly, just walk away. But human psychology is not that simple, because toxic relationships often operate like emotional addiction. And addiction is never built only on pain. It is built on inconsistency. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. It is the same mechanism used in casinos. You never know when the reward is coming, so your brain becomes obsessed with chasing it. One day they ignore you, the next day they shower you with affection. One moment they make you feel worthless. The next moment they tell you that you are the only person who truly understands them. And your nervous system becomes trapped in a cycle of emotional uncertainty. You stop seeking healthy love. You start seeking emotional relief. That is why toxic relationships can feel impossible to escape, because your brain confuses emotional intensity with emotional importance. The chaos creates attachment. Nietzsche once wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties." And toxic relationships are built entirely on invisible threads. Guilt, hope, fear, nostalgia, loneliness, and the desperate belief that maybe things will return to how they once were. But they rarely do. The beginning of a toxic relationship is often a psychological trap. They mirror your dreams, your wounds, your insecurities. They become exactly what you were searching for, not because they deeply understand you, but because emotionally manipulative people often understand human vulnerability better than emotionally healthy people do. And slowly, you begin abandoning yourself to maintain the relationship. You tolerate disrespect because you remember the good moments. You excuse manipulation because you fear abandonment. You silence your intuition because loneliness feels scarier than suffering. This is why many people stay, not because they are weak, but because Emotional dependency changes the chemistry of the mind. The relationship becomes both the poison and the cure, and that is the cruelest psychological trap of all. Part 2. How toxic relationships erase your identity. The most dangerous part of a toxic relationship is not what it does to your heart, but what it does to your sense of self. At the beginning, you barely notice the changes. They happen quietly, almost invisibly. You laugh a little less loudly because they once called you too much. You stop mentioning certain dreams because they mocked them before. You become careful with your words, your emotions, even your personality. And eventually, without realizing it, you begin editing yourself for someone else's comfort. This is how identity erosion begins. Not through one catastrophic moment, but through thousands of tiny emotional cuts. A toxic relationship slowly trains you to betray yourself in exchange for temporary peace. Carl Rogers, the famous psychologist, once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. But toxic relationships operate in reverse. They make you believe you must constantly change to deserve love. So you adapt. You shrink parts of yourself. You suppress your needs. You silence your instincts. And over time, you no longer know where the performance ends and the real you begins. This is why many people leaving toxic relationships feel strangely empty afterward. Not because they lost the other person, but because they lost themselves. And perhaps the most psychologically damaging weapon used in toxic dynamics is gaslighting. A manipulation tactic so subtle that it feels almost invisible while it's happening. You remember something clearly. They deny it. You express pain. They call you dramatic. You confront disrespect. They accuse you of overreacting. Little by little, your confidence in your own perception begins to collapse. You stop trusting your memory, your emotions, your intuition. And once someone controls your perception of reality, they no longer need physical chains to control you emotionally. This is why victims of toxic relationships often sound uncertain when they speak. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm too sensitive. No. You have simply been psychologically conditioned to doubt yourself. And the terrifying truth is this: humans would rather preserve attachment than preserve identity, because deep down, abandonment activates one of our oldest evolutionary fears: isolation. So the mind makes a painful compromise. If losing myself keeps me from losing them, maybe losing myself is worth it, but it never is. Because self-betrayal creates a kind of exhaustion sleep cannot fix. You wake up anxious, emotionally numb, disconnected from your own soul. Even moments of happiness feel guilty because your nervous system has become addicted to emotional tension. Buddha once said, "Attachment is the root of suffering," and nowhere is that more visible than in toxic love. Because the more emotionally attached you become to someone unhealthy, the more you abandon the relationship with yourself. And eventually, one terrifying realization appears: you can survive without them, but you no longer know how to survive as yourself. That is when the real psychological damage becomes visible. Part 3. Why toxic people often feel irresistible. Some of the most dangerous people do not enter your life looking harmful. They enter your life looking exactly like what you were missing. That is what makes toxic relationships so psychologically confusing. If toxic people were cruel from the beginning, nobody would stay. But manipulation rarely introduces itself honestly. It arrives disguised as connection. At first, they make you feel extraordinary, seen, desired, important. They listen carefully to your pain. They remember your insecurities. They study your emotional needs with almost frightening precision. And suddenly, you feel emotionally understood in a way you have never experienced before. This is often called love bombing, an overwhelming flood of affection, attention, validation, and emotional intensity designed to create rapid attachment. But here is the hidden psychology behind it. The human brain bonds fastest during emotional extremes. When someone gives you intense affection very quickly, your nervous system interprets it as deep intimacy, even if true trust has not yet been built. And that emotional acceleration creates dependency before clarity. You become attached to the feeling they gave you, not necessarily the person they truly are. This is why many toxic relationships feel almost spiritual in the beginning, like destiny, like fate, like finally finding your person. But often, what feels like soul-level connection is actually psychological targeting. They sense your loneliness, your abandonment wounds, your need for validation, and consciously or unconsciously, they become the answer to those emotional hungers. Sigmund Freud once wrote, "We are never so vulnerable as when we love." Because love lowers psychological defenses. When we deeply desire connection, we stop evaluating clearly. We ignore red flags because we are hypnotized by emotional relief, and toxic people often create a cycle of idealization and devaluation. First, they place you on a pedestal, then they slowly push you off it. At the start, you are perfect. Later, nothing you do feels enough, and this inconsistency creates psychological instability. You begin obsessing over winning back the version of them you met in the beginning, but that version was often carefully constructed, not entirely fake, but strategically amplified. And here is the heartbreaking part. Many toxic people are not monsters in the cinematic sense. Some are deeply wounded individuals, repeating unconscious patterns of control, insecurity, fear, or emotional immaturity. Hurt people often hurt people. But understanding someone's pain does not mean sacrificing your peace to heal them. That is where many empathetic people become trapped. They confuse compassion with responsibility. They think, if I love them harder, maybe they will change. If I stay patient, maybe the good version of them will return. But love alone cannot heal someone who refuses self-awareness, and eventually you realize something painful. You were not addicted to who they truly were. You were addicted to who they pretended to be in the beginning. That realization breaks something inside you, but it also sets you free. Part 4. Healing after toxic love. Rebuilding the self you abandoned. The hardest part of healing is accepting that the person who broke you cannot be the person who fixes you. After a toxic relationship ends, something strange happens. The silence feels unbearable. Not because the relationship was healthy, but because your nervous system became dependent on emotional chaos. Peace feels unfamiliar. You check your phone compulsively. You replay old conversations in your mind. You wonder if maybe you exaggerated everything. And this is where many people return, not because the relationship improved, but because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. This is the hidden psychology of trauma bonds. The mind becomes emotionally attached to cycles of pain and relief. The same person who hurt you also comforted you. The same person who confused you also reassured you. So when they disappear, your brain experiences withdrawal. Not just emotionally, chemically. That is why healing from toxic love can feel less like heartbreak and more like detoxification. And unfortunately, many people misunderstand healing. They think healing means forgetting, or becoming emotionless, or pretending the relationship never mattered. But true healing is something far more difficult. It is rebuilding trust with yourself. Because toxic relationships do not only damage your heart, they damage your relationship with your own intuition. You stopped listening to your discomfort. You ignored your boundaries. You abandoned your inner voice to preserve attachment. So healing begins the moment you finally start choosing yourself again, not selfishly, but honestly. Albert Camus once wrote, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer, and that is the hidden beauty of surviving emotional destruction." you discover parts of yourself that only pain could reveal. You begin learning that love should not require self-erasure, that peace is more valuable than intensity, that being alone is infinitely healthier than being emotionally imprisoned, and slowly your identity begins returning. You laugh naturally again. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for existing. The anxiety inside your chest softens. Your nervous system no longer lives in survival mode. And one day, something remarkable happens. You stop missing them, not because the memories disappeared, but because your self-respect finally became stronger than your attachment. That is the moment healing truly begins. Not when the pain fully leaves, but when you finally understand that losing yourself was never the price love was supposed to demand. Because real love does not manipulate your mind. It does not make you fear honesty. It does not force you to shrink your soul for acceptance. Real love feels safe enough for truth. And perhaps the greatest lesson toxic relationships teach us is this. The people we chase the hardest are often mirrors of the wounds we have not healed within ourselves, which means healing is not only about finding better people, it is about becoming someone who no longer feels at home inside emotional chaos. So if you are rebuilding yourself after toxic love, remember this. You are not starting over. You are returning to the person you were before survival taught you to disappear. And maybe the most powerful revenge is not making them suffer. Maybe it is becoming someone who no longer suffers because of them. The final reflection. Toxic relationships rarely destroy people overnight. They do it slowly, quietly, psychologically. They make you question your worth before they question your loyalty. They make you abandon yourself before they abandon you. But awareness changes everything, because once you understand the psychology behind emotional manipulation, attachment and trauma bonds, you stop romanticizing suffering. You begin choosing peace over chaos, clarity over obsession, self-respect over emotional addiction. And maybe that is the real transformation. Not simply leaving toxic people, but finally refusing to participate in your own self-destruction. So if this video spoke to something deep inside you, take one moment today to ask yourself, have I been loving someone else more than I have been loving myself? Because the relationship that saves your life in the future may begin with rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself today.